Welcome everyone. It's great to see a big turnout tonight. We are sold out, but unfortunately the flu has reduced our numbers somewhat. I'm Fraser Maywood. I'm the chair at Sustainable Energy Now and also a member of the Electrify WA committee. I'd like to thank all the volunteers for all the hard work in putting tonight's event together. So a shout out to Renee and Lily and all their hard work, and all the other volunteers who have helped put the event together. And obviously thanks to our guest Saul and Meri for making themselves available for this important conversation. So emergency response, in the unlikely event, Meri, of an emergency. I think last time we met we had a building evacuation, but that's probably hopefully a one-off. You may need to evacuate following the whoop whoop sound, so please follow the directions of security. The fire exits are at the front or at the rear of the building, and the assembly areas to the right following as you leave the building. I'd like to provide an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Budja we're meeting on, the Whadjuk people. And we recognize Whadjuk's people connection to country as we come together to talk about ways that we can address the climate crisis that significantly impacts country. We also recognize that First Nations people travel vast distances on foot to share knowledge and cultural practices. So Saul's trip across the Nullarbor by plane to tell his stories is, somewhat easier. We recognise elders past and present, and we recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. So a little bit about who's who in the zoo. So Rewiring Australia, you're probably all familiar with, is a non-profit, independent, non-partisan organisation dedicated to representing the people, households and communities in the energy systems. And they research, communicate and demonstrate how electrification is the fastest way to reduce carbon emissions and save money for everyday Australians. So they provide free resources and organisational support to largely self-organising electric communities, who is a number of you here in the audience. So a shout out to Kirsty McDonald and Tim Baxter and all the team at Rewiring Australia who support and help us. There is a growing number of electric communities across the country and in WA as the word gets around. So in order to present or provide a coordinated voice to the state parliament, or state government and authorities, we formed Electrify WA as a peak representative body, and shout out to Tim Cahill, the chair at Electrify WA, for helping pull this all together. Thank you, Tim. And all the volunteers on the great work that they do. And they are all volunteer organisations, and they're providing the energy and the enthusiasm to help their communities electrify. And we are lucky to have the resources and technology to make this happen. And the barriers we need to overcome for a faster and fairer transition are largely human-induced and hence can be overcome. So if you're interested in joining an existing group or forming a new electric community, then navigate your way using the QR code on the screen. Now, a copy of this presentation will be made available on our website after the event. And lastly, SEN, many of you will know SEN and the work that we do. We are a grassroots, not-for-profit, member-based advocacy group promoting sustainable energy now. In WA, rooftop solar is the largest generator on the Southwest Interconnected System, and we have just released this report indicating that we're only using around 13% of rooftop capacity. And the report explores how battery-backed rooftop solar with flexible exports and smart demand management could play a much bigger role in the transition, with less need for large-scale development. But needless to say, the Energy Minister's not that interested in hearing about alternative plans. We need all the actions that we can get. These are WA's emissions, and they continue to rise despite the rollout of renewable energy across the state. So the state government is committed to closing state-owned coal fire by 2030, and this will help reduce emissions by only about 5%. or 8% if you include the privately owned Blue Water coal-fired power station. So in order to make a significant reduction, we need to decarbonize large emissive intensive industries. And in terms of how our report card against the rest of the country, including Queensland, another mining state, we're not doing too well. However, as individuals and communities through our home electrification journey and collective actions, we can help build the political capital for our state government and private enterprises to take more ambitious action. So, this is a slide from Rewiring Australia. So the supply on the left-hand side, the supply side of clean electricity through the grid is essential to decarbonise our economy, and this is where much of the climate advocacy to date has focused. But on the demand side, looking at the many millions of machines that use electricity or could use electricity, and in which individuals and communities are in control of, they have a significant impact on the grid. And the state and federal battery rebate program and interest-free loans is a great start in WA, but there's a very long way to go to democratise our energy for all Australians. Okay, let's introduce the speakers. So Saul, he needs a little introduction, even in WA. He gained his PhD from MIT in 2004 and subsequently built a number of climate-orientated tech companies. He consulted to the US Department of Energy on energy flows through the US economy and was influential in the formulation of the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act. This influenced his approach to his writing that combines science, engineering, and economics with community and household level technical details in his books. His books include The Big Switch, The Wires That Bind, and the just released plug-in, and those books are for sale in the foyer. Saul formed Rewiring America in 2019 and Rewiring Australia with Dan Cass in 2020. Our other guest tonight is Meri Fatin, who will interview Saul tonight. And audience questions will be tabled after the interview using the smartphone Slido, using the QR code or the meeting number shown. On there, questions can be upvoted on there, so you can upvote or downvote questions, and we'll be answering the most popular questions first. So Meri regularly convenes public conversations and has a particular interest in the transformation of leadership and culture that is needed to secure a safe future for us all. Good on you, Meri. Meri was party to bring in Christina Figueres, the chief architect of the Climate Paris Agreement, to Perth in early March 2020. I think Mark McGowan was very keen to meet it, wasn't he, Meri?
As was Peter Coleman.
Yeah, as Peter Coleman, yeah. And this led to her focus on leadership, climate transition, and environmental issues. Meri was guest curator at the TEDx Countdown WA Climate Leaders Summit in 2020, which led to the founding of WA Climate Leaders, which Meri's been very active in. This informal network is intended to inspire visionary leadership on climate action in WA in this critical decade. Meri is a graduate of WAPA and a presenter on RTR FM, and Meri is an experienced and versatile facilitator and broadcaster. There you go, Meri. Please welcome Meri and Saul to the stage.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Fraser. Very much appreciated. And thank you all so much for being here on your Friday night. It is a very important conversation, and it feels like we're building a community around this, which is very, very important as we go forward. Saul Griffith, thanks so much for being in Perth on this very sombre day for Western Australians. We've just heard that the federal minister has agreed that the North West Shelf expansion can go ahead up to 2070. Feeling a little low right now. Do you have any words of solace for us?
You're in better shape than America. So it reminds me of two conversations I had, same theme, but one of them was Bob Brown when I first came back to Australia in 2020. And I was in Tasmania and I got to meet Bob and I was chatting with him. And he said, let me know when you need some young people. And what he meant is like some people that bolt themselves to fences and chain themselves to trees. And I think we are so close on the technological package and even some of the cultural and social, and I love the way it was introduced, like largely we only have human problems between us and success now on climate. And so I think you just need a few young people to chain themselves to the fences for, I think, 3, 4, 5 years. And then, I know, we'll feed them. And that's enough time for us to undermine the economic case for using gas for pretty much anything. And that's the hopelessly optimistic view. I might be off by 5 years, but I'm not off by 20. So just everything we can to pause any new fossil project. It's just, we have to do the same, I believe we need to be on the front foot and we need to fight gas with the same filthy tactics they use against us. They are using delay and denial tactics, and we should just fight back with same. So it's bad. 2070 is a terrible timeline. It's all stupid, but I think we can bankrupt those companies in the mid-2030s and just get your teenager while they're still radical to chain themselves. I think you just sand in the tank of the diesel machine still works. What was the name of the book? Monkey Wrench Gang? Mm. Yeah, just a little monkey wrench ganging for 5 years, and we got them.
So what was the second conversation? That was one with Bob Brown. What was the other?
Well, we didn't say all of those things. The other one was with a set of US senators that were fighting the Alaskan gas expansion. Similar stupidity, like one of the, another magnificent, largely unharmed part of the world that we were about to give away. It's like they're, and this was hard politics. This was 2020, and I was, they were facing defeat on the issue, and so they were like, what do you do? And I think just hold it up in the courts for long enough. That's the US way to do it. You hold everything up in the courts.
Well, thank you. Does everyone feel more optimistic now? It kind of leads me to where I thought I was.
I can make it funnier.
Oh, please. Please.
I can't believe how naive we were. So, there was a huge number of people, and it was an extraordinary experience as an engineer who never thought they'd wind up in policy environments, to literally see the thousands of people from civil society and academia and the non-government sector writing, collectively doing the work to make the Inflation Reduction Act happen. And we were beating the gas industry like it was a dirty knife fight. It was a 2-year negotiation with a couple of holdout Democrats, and it was horrible. And the gas industry, they were outspending us on this effort 10, 100 to 1, but we won. And we were all so naive because it was the first environmental victory of that scale in a long, long time. We were like, we got high on it. No one ever conceived of the revenge fantasy that they had, which is the Trump administration. And so, I don't know, I watch one of those Liam Neeson movies every year, the ones where they kidnap your daughter, you kill everyone in Eastern Europe and you get your daughter back. That's currently my plan with the gas industry and my revenge fantasy on their revenge fantasy. And that's where we pull the rug out of their core business, which is industry and electricity generation. And I think we're within sight.
That is awesome news. I do feel more optimistic.
I want to be played by Jason Statham, not Liam Neeson.
Okay. Fair enough too. It sort of led me to the often when we have these conversations about climate and environment issues, it ends with people saying, well, what can I do? And it's often, you can write a letter to your local politician, or you can join a grassroots movement, or you can join the Greens, or you can stand as a community independent. But I feel like what you're saying is that this is the greatest agency that we have, is electrifying our own lives. Am I right in saying that?
That's almost exactly right. The theory of change that developed through the UN process. So the UN process, the scientists did a great job. Climate change is real, we should fix it. This is like late 1990s consensus builds, we should fix it. Now what should have happened is they had handed it to the engineers, and the engineers would do some math and say you need to build this and this and this, and we have the solution, but they handed it to the economists. I'm kind of not joking. And the economists don't really understand how energy systems and infrastructure and machines work. And so they looked at the problem and they said, oh, well, obviously you should eliminate the heaviest emitters first. The heaviest emitters are coal, industry, steel, electricity generation. The problem is that all of those sectors of the economy pay the wholesale price of fossil fuels. They pay $100 a tonne for coal, which is half a cent a kilowatt hour. They pay $4 a gigajoule for gas. Ignore the numbers, it's cheap, really cheap. And so we had a big focus on that, and that's why most of climate policy through the early 2000s, 2010s was supply side, where we get our energy, the big energy from. But the reality is 42%-ish of global emissions come from the decisions that everyday humans make around their kitchen table. They're the 5 or 6 fossil fuel powered machines that you own in your own life. This whole book is the reduction of all of this theory into something a tradie can read, hopefully. And so literally the decisions you make around your kitchen table, what car you buy next, what stove you buy next, what water heater you buy next, what heater for your house you buy next, and where you get your electricity from, which also happens to mean can you do solar on a battery. That's about 40% of global emissions. If small businesses as well as households, so what they call the commercial sector, including buildings like this, if they made the same decisions not to buy fossil fuel but electric, that gets actually close to 60% of global emissions. So they're the decisions that we have agency in our everyday lives. The rest of the emissions are made by corporate boards, mostly, and then and agricultural. Yeah. So we don't really have agency in there. And we don't have all of the agency in the first half, because government regulations and other, but we do have agency in voting for the governments that make this easier or harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I read or heard you say, I feel like I've just poured Saul Griffith into my head endlessly for the last couple of weeks.
Sorry.
But you said think of these domestic investment decisions as national infrastructure.
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to do a Jedi mind trick here. On the federal government, and it's kind of working. And you know, because in reality, in the 20th century, we all thought of infrastructure as roads and power lines and pipelines. That was infrastructure. In Australia, so on Monday, 76.4% of the electricity used in Australia was generated by renewables. 46.7, I may have it wrong, but it's nearly that, percent was generated by Australian rooftops. So, and in the future, when we have somewhere between 15 and 20 million electric vehicles, they will be the largest battery on the Australian grid. So we, in a very real sense now, are making significant portions of the infrastructure investments that will keep the country running. To really emphasise that, I can't remember the name of the mine. I actually got an old mining engineer mate up in the back. There's a mine in South Australia that's gold, copper and uranium.
Olympic Dam.
Olympic Dam, there you go. Olympic Dams largely operates on rooftop solar now. So the net production off the rooftops is enough to power. So we are literally now powering industry off our rooftops. So the reason I'm making that argument, and it's a little bit about the fairer bit, is we are guaranteeing the profits of the energy generators. Everything's a little bit different in Western Australia. You are special, so sometimes I'll say things about the rest of the country that aren't exactly true here, but they're spiritually true. But we, in New South Wales, our grid is owned by, Macquarie Bank and the Malaysian hedge fund. We guarantee them 10% returns on their investments in their infrastructure. We're not guaranteeing the returns on Australian households buying rooftop solar and electric vehicles. In fact, we lower their feed-in tariffs and we make increasingly punitive tariff structures. So we make this infrastructure argument so the government hopefully will reach the point where actually we should invest in households. And I think we've had some influence. The energy minister was kind enough to call me a couple of days before they announced the big battery rebate program, and say, thanks for helping get this to happen. And there's a lot of civil society groups. No way we're taking all the credit for that, but there was a lot of people working on it and creating the social license. So I think we are actually affecting the mindset of Australia and having the country realise, the emissions we can do today, right? You can't, unfortunately, we don't have an alternative for industrial energy that works today at scale to replace these gas investments. But what we can do today to decarbonise is these sort of personal infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that in a bit more detail, because I really like the fact that you actually give a kind of a narrative. I think I flagged it in here about how you actually make a plan. I think I'll be buying a new car in blank space. I'd like it to be an electric scooter. Is it?
Oh, well, in my case, so the idea here is, I'm going to assume that this is a fairly speaking to the converted crowd, and the first couple of books I wrote, Electrify and Big Switch, were probably more for you. This is not to discourage you from buying the book, please buy the book at the end. But the publisher called me and said, I really want you to write a how to do the electrification book for the very average Australian punter. And I think the message you want there is yes, panic about climate change, it's going to be bad, we should avoid it. And take all of that anxiety and panic and now make 5 good decisions in the next 10 years. Because that's roughly, stoves last 10 years, stoves last 12, water heaters last 10, the central heating systems last 15, and cars last 15 to 20. So if we all are replacing these at the next thing, you actually can kind of hit the 2040 targets to be zero emission, because we'll be, greening the electricity that feeds all of those machines over that same time frame. So so the advice here is make a plan for your house. I made a mistake and I bought a Volvo in 2019, so in 2034 I will buy an electric Volvo.
Is that in there, or are you just making that up?
Well, you said blank and then it implied that I had to fill in the blank.
That's what it is. That's what
it is. I think I will be buying a new, this is meant for you to fill it in. I think I'll be buying a new car in a year. I'd like it to be an electric.
Brand, is that what's meant to go in there?
Well, in my case, in our family, I think I would be buying a new car in 2025. I'd like it to be an electric Volkswagen bus.
Yes. Wow.
And we just bought the electric Volkswagen bus, and it's very nice. The doors close so slowly, my ADHD just... I hate it. Everything else, it's the car that can only be improved by taking things away. Less screens. Take the servo motors off so I have the right to slam my own. You should be allowed to slam your own.
Yes, you definitely should.
Anyway, also, I believe my water heater is... most people don't even know whether... There's a huge number of Australians don't know whether their water heater runs on gas or electricity. That's how little we know about our own lives. So I believe my water heater is, 10 years old. That means in 2 years' time, I'll buy an electric heat pump water heater. Next time I'm going to do a kitchen reno because I plan to, or I'm going to move in a couple of years. When I finance the new house, that'll be a great time to electrify the kitchen. These are not decisions we make every day. They're mildly stressful financial decisions. They actually require some planning. They're not the cheap things in your life. They are the infrastructure of your life.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, if the world literally got on this plan, that's really our only chance to beat 2 degrees.
Yeah, and the philosophy is very clearly laid out that it's not that you need to do this instantaneously, you just need to do it incrementally as these needs come up.
If you can afford to, you should be doing it today, and you're just a hypocrite not to. So
today is good.
Yeah, today is good. If you drove a Range Rover here, tomorrow is an excellent day to not drive a Range Rover.
So, I mean, obviously climate activism has its place, and yet I wonder what your thoughts are on how much further this message reaches when you're not talking about saving the planet, you're talking about saving money.
I think we're reaching a lot further, and politicians are in Australia very concerned with cost of living globally. We have this giant wealth transfer thing moving money upwards, so the bottom is squeezed all over the world. And so politicians are intrigued by anything that can be a cost of living solution. The reality is, or maybe I'll finish that thought, but I'll start with the opening chapter of this book. Actually, is I interview a lovely friend of mine called Chris Kerr. He's got 4 daughters, so it's not in his words, it's not a low energy household. He lives on the south coast. He started electrifying the whole house in 2019. He was doing it kind of for revenge economic reasons. He got a $1,500 electricity bill. He hated it. It's like they just had their holiday to Bali cancelled by COVID. So he's like, I'm going to spend all that money on the biggest solar system I can get. He did that to cancel his energy bill. And then that started his electrification process. He was a bit of an engineer, and I'm sure there's a few in the audience that have done this, over-optimized the timer on the hot water heater. Someone in the family had a cold shower, and he was reminded that although he was working for return on investment, the household also wanted a return on comfort. And then he realized that the other incentive in the house was the 4 daughters, who as modern Australian children are very aware of the challenges and costs of climate change, and they were in it for the return on climate. And I started the book with that story because the reality is these things are no longer in conflict. They were in conflict with each other maybe 10 years ago, but now the right thing to do economically for your household is the right thing to do for climate, is the right thing to improve health outcomes. Like the leading cause of respiratory illness in Australia is determined, and in America and around the world, is whether or not you burn fossil fuels to cook inside your house. So, it's a win-win-win, which begs the question, why don't we just go full hammer and tong at it faster, and then why don't we make it easier for ourselves to do it?
Yeah, well, he was in one of the episodes of your Shameless Plug podcast. If anyone hasn't followed the Shameless Plug podcast, here's a shameless plug for it. And so I liked the story about how once he got the ball rolling with that transition and the thought of return on comfort, then it was like all of a sudden all of these incredible kind of new luxuries appeared in the house.
He went completely overboard. He ended up having too much electricity. He's like, well, I got to do something with it, so I better install a spa. And he's like, still have too much, better buy a couple of electric mountain bikes. Still have too much, bought an electric hydrofoil. He's now like goes surfing on an electric surfboard every morning. So it's I don't know, but he's living the life. And I don't really love selling the message that consumerism is going to solve climate change. Like, I actually come deeply from a bicycle advocacy, a few less Ford Rangers would be nice kind of thing, but the reality is the populace isn't there yet, and technically we probably can roughly all have the lifestyles we have today if it's all electric and meet our climate challenge. So we don't have to make it about denial. That story didn't sell well. We've tried for 50 years selling the efficiency less, if we all suffer just a little bit more and are a little bit colder in winter, we'll be slightly less fucked. This was the environmental message for 50 years, and it isn't working. So changing that narrative, return on investment, return on comfort, fixing the climate, we can do it.
Yeah. So you talk about how both consumers and tradies can actually be the heroes of this story going forward. So we've heard a little bit about our role as consumers, but tell us a bit more about the tradies.
This is an aspiration. So the majority of Australian tradies, it's changing generationally, but they're still selling against the program. So you'll need to replace the water heater it's easy if I can have a gas one tomorrow. Pay cash, be real cheap. They're not really educated to be the sales force, but they are the sales force for most of these household decisions, including the battery and the solar. And we need them on team. We haven't culturally made them the heroes of climate. Like, we're ill-advisedly choosing people like me to be the climate heroes. It's not, what we really need is that cultural currency to be bestowed upon the actual people who are going to show up and install it and make it happen. So I talk about that a little bit in the book. Rewiring Australia, we sponsored apparently 80% of Australian tradies surf once a month at least in Australia. It's extraordinary. So we sponsored the Surfing Pro-Am, which was always won by a tradie at Narrabeen last year. Trying to figure out how to, that was in with the Surfers for Climate people. Like, how do we start getting them on board, doing the heavy lifting for us, and getting the cultural cachet and the social reward for doing it, as well as getting paid to do it. But like, I would like us to reward the people who are really going to do the work.
And so, if this were a room of electricians, how would you be talking to them?
It's a great question. No one ever asked that question. That's hard. I'd apologise to them that I'm a mechanical engineer mansplaining electricity to them. I'd make a joke about Kirchhoff's law. Some of them would get it. I think the answer is, you guys are the workforce that's going to clean up the country. You're going to get paid well. There's great job security. Train 3 of your best friends. We are short. I think the estimate is somewhere between 40 and 100,000 Sparkies that we need to get the job done on the time frame required.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
The number of extras, and not just electricians, is it?
Electricians, HVAC. We're not even as a country now producing enough engineers for our own domestic demand. Like, we've had a huge, massive shift away from these things, which is a shame. So I do believe we need to embody some cultural cachet back into that.
So when we're taking advice from tradies then, and given some of the potential pitfalls that you've outlined, what kinds of questions, do we need to look out for if we're not people who are in the know about this stuff that we might be led to believe, other than what you said around availability of gas-related products and stuff that we probably need to watch out for to make sure that we do the right thing in our homes?
One of my favourite people to interview in the book, he's like a quintessentially Australian guy, Bryn. He's started into the solar business as a 17-year-old apprentice, realised that solar was going to be the thing. I think he's now personally, or his people he has trained, have installed 135,000 rooftop solar systems. It's pretty good. He's extremely bright in that you just can tell, like, he didn't need to finish high school, found his way, but could have done anything with his brain. He's fabulous. His advice, because I think the advice that people really want would come from the people who are really professional. He has built his whole business model. He won't sell you the solar system unless you've got 2 other quotes. Like, he refuses. He just believes it's such bad practice for people to go with the first quote, and there's infinite stories about this. And he really wants you to get the other 2 quotes so that you're an informed consumer and you know why he's not going to sell you the cheapest system. His advice is beyond that is probably don't buy the cheapest of whatever the thing is. Buy the second or third cheapest maybe. But there are still shonky operators. There are still people who are not genuine. They're just in it for the quick buck. And so really just do the shopping and do the shopping well. And then, what we've learned independently of that is a huge amount of the reasons Australians aren't doing this is just trust, right? One more Instagram ad selling you cheap solar and you're like, oh, I give up. And we really trust our neighbours and our friends far more. And in our community where we're trying to push this faster, it's all about, and which tradie did you use and which service. And I think those hand-to-hand community recommendations are far stronger, much more, and in much better outcomes.
Yeah.
So in whichever way you can find trust, and it is in fact all about the tradie, and are they shonky or not? And we have a lot of really great tradies in Australia, and the best way to find the ones that aren't shocky is to do the research, get the bids.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to go back to storytelling in a sec, because I think it's so important to the success of this whole thing, but there was a question that came through on the slide earlier about how we don't actually have a gas connection ban here in Western Australia. So we've got new housing developments that are still being fitted out with gas appliances, and I guess the question is really whether you have any kind of insights into how this actually gets halted.
Gas kills kittens. Actually, technically true. The SOXs and NOXs hit the floor. The pets are the ones that inhale the most of it. We did studies at Rewiring America in the US that showed people responded better to messaging that gas kills your kittens and your puppies than gas is bad for your children's respiratory health. So, I actually think we should, in the spirit of being on the front foot, I actually totally imagined giant banners pasted under the Woodside building that are and gas kills kittens. And I think we just got to do storytelling that's a little bit emotional. That's what they do. They sold us the idea of a clean blue flame that kills your kittens.
People are madly making notes here, I can see. I guess there's another kind of, it's a nitpicky kind of question, but do you think the number of apps that are involved with electrification are off-putting or problematic for some potential customers?
I think actually there are still many ways we can fail to solve climate change. One of them might be we've just got too many apps, too many buttons, too many screens. It doesn't feel simple. The last step of making the house all talk to itself is really hard. And my 81-year-old mother, who's extraordinary, is just no way I want one more app for my home energy management system to hook up my solar. And I'm not sure what we want to do is to, for her granddaughter, my daughter, that should Australia's 12-year-olds be solving the app problem for us to connect our solar and battery systems? Because that's what we're on track for.
Yeah.
Right? How do I use this thing? Probably at scale, what's going to happen is that the tradie is going to program those apps for us, and it should largely be set and forget. We've got a lot of energy nerds in this room. Like me, we're engineers. A lot of us, we're over-optimizing. We care too much. My father's friend group at the golf club, they're buying $30 rounds of beer and boasting about the $6.38 they made on Amber yesterday. It's let me shout you, I made money with solar. It's a terrible business. But for the other, 11 million households in Australia, they just want it to work and they don't want to go through a screen. So I do think this is really significant. Honestly, it's my comment about the Volkswagen bus. I used to own one of the original Volkswagen buses. Unbelievable. I literally only needed to carry a 12mm and a 13mm wrench. I had this hippie book manual that was great, how to keep your Volkswagen alive. The opening chapter was the time it takes to roll a joint and light it is exactly the right amount of time to warm up a Volkswagen engine before driving it. That car was designed to go forever. But the new version of that is about 1,000 pounds, it's about 500 kilos overweight with servo motors that prevent me from slamming the door. It's got 2 screens I don't want. We still haven't figured out how to turn the beeping off. The child, we're losing with beeps and screens and buttons. Thus is modernity.
Yes. I want to move to 2515 now. I'd love to hear how it's going.
I feel like we're way off topic now. But
No, it's all part of the same story.
Okay.
So you've got subsidies for 500 of 4,000 homes in the region, and collaborating with Bright, who I think Catherine McConnell was here in the last time you were in Perth. She joined you in a panel discussion. The
Yeah, and
founder
in
of
fact,
Bright.
I interviewed her in the book. So, and she does finance.
Yeah, so the green finance, and then the Endeavour Energy, obviously your local energy retailer.
DNSP. No, they're DNSP. They're the poles and wires.
Okay, and then an arena. So what stage are you at? How's it going? What's the story that you can tell us now?
The brutally honest story is the technical thing. So nobody has proved that the future works anywhere yet. And what I mean by that is there's still nerdy, nuanced questions about whether we can keep the system working. If all the homes are electrified, all the cars are electrified, you're going to need 200 or 300% of the electricity over those poles and wires. Will you be able to balance it through the day, through the year, through all the seasons? And what we wanted to do was make the future happen one place first. And so it was 500 homes, because it turns out that the subunit of the grid is approximately the same everywhere in the world, because approximately every country built it at the same time in the early 20th century. And the pieces of equipment you bought were quantized and provided by the same companies, General Electric, Schneider. They're still around today. And so the grid looks similar. So we kind of like, if we solve it in one place in the world, we solve it everywhere. And we started there. The most logical place to solve this first is actually either South Australia or Western Australia. So you guys can still catch up and win. And I want you to. It should be a global race to prove to all the naysayers that it's never going to work. That, oh, it just works, and the reliability went up and the cost went down. So the local grid usually is 5 strings. There's about 1,000, somewhere between 200 and 1,000 homes on each one of those strings. And if you can electrify all the homes and all the cars in one string, it shows that it works all the time. That would be proof. And so we could basically do that in our community if we got 500 homes out of the 4,000 homes in our community to all electrify. That was the idea. We went to ARENA. We need $20 million. We just need enough subsidy to help people get the cars, and we'll lease them and do this. They said, Labor government, we're not in middle class welfare. We're not going to subsidise electric cars. We believe in choice. All of the things that do it. So we didn't get to do the cars, which is actually technically the most difficult thing we're going to do, is bring all the cars onto the grid. So we didn't quite get to do the hardest bit. Then we were reduced to doing the appliances. But in many respects, even so, we're not quite as ambitious as we were. It's going better than we thought, and it's going well. But we actually succeeded before we began. We had created this idea that we should be doing this in communities, and it bought us political currency that we were just going to go and do it, and that Australian people wanted to. It was hugely powerful to every energy minister I spoke to that we were able to just door knock in our community and get, more than, I think it was 40% of our community of 4,000 houses like, yeah, we're willing to go on this ride with you. And I think that was a wake-up call that Australia is ready to do it. Anyway, so it's going well. It means we're in the game pushing the utilities, the poles and wires people on what we need to do technically, and it means we're also in the game on fixing the regulations of the Australian electricity market so that we can do this in a way that works better for the households and stops the monopolies from. It is a tooth and nail fight in New South Wales on who gets to own the batteries and who gets to manipulate them and who gets to take the money home. That's another thing you can win, because you own the poles and wires as Western Australians. We don't. We sold it in a fit of Paul Keating neoliberalism. We all blame Howard, but it started with Paul. And so it's harder to get the structure of the market to work.
So I want to keep asking you about 2515, but I just want to go a little bit further into what you think needs to be asked for around regulation and policy, at least federally, so that we can kind of relate it to what's going on here. Like what would be the kind of real low-hanging fruit that could be changed quickly and make a big difference?
There's 2 categories of policy. There's 2 challenges. broadly. This whole energy transition is a shift from fuels to finance. So we currently buy cheap fossil fuel machines like a Toyota Camry, and we feed it expensive petrol for the next 20 years. If you buy a slightly more expensive electric Kia, you'll basically feed it almost free energy for the next 20 years, and you'll save money over the lifetime. How do you solve this problem of an expensive thing up front? We learned that in the early 20th century. We invented car finance. It was a guy called Alfred P. Sloan. The modern house mortgage was based on his work, and that was what Roosevelt's whole New Deal was largely hinged upon home building, and he enabled home building by inventing home mortgages, right? So the middle class was built on financing everyone to own nice things. So we know how to do this. We now need to invent new types of finance that will let not just everyone in this audience, but everyone in Australia, regardless of credit score and social position, to be able to afford the things that will save money in the long term. It shouldn't be a radical idea, but it sounds radical to a lot of people because it's like, we can't let the poor people have nice things. I think might be the subconscious text, but that's what we need to do. You can't half solve climate change. If you want to make a culture war, let all the rich people solve climate change. And this is actually a little bit what's happening in America. The Inflation Reduction Act was classically regressive because it was all tax incentives. You had to be rich enough to pay enough tax to get the money back to buy the nice electric car. So we shouldn't do that as a country if we still believe in a fair go in Australia. So maybe that's a not easy thing, but that's the really impactful thing to get us to go to scale as a country, figure out how to help everyone on the financing of it. The other nerdy piece of it is we designed the rules of the electricity market for the 20th century where electricity flowed one way from the grid to you. Like I said before, now there's huge periods of the day in states like Western Australia, South Australia, where electricity is flowing backwards the other way, and we are still protecting these people. We're not protecting these people in that electricity market. What you really want to do is probably the easiest way to do it in Western Australia is you create peer-to-peer trading. So this is going to be a little technical, a little nerdy. But
no, I was going to ask you about it, so that's perfect. Thank you.
Any electrical engineers or physicists here? Anyone know what Kirchhoff's law is? Yeah. Oh man, if I get to one person in the audience is great for Kirchhoff's law. We got two, maybe more. Did anyone miss anyone? I don't want to offend. Kirchhoff's law basically says electrons are lazy and they want to go to the nearest load. They don't. But we pretend in the Australian electricity market that when you sell your solar back to the grid, that it travels all the way back to the offices of your case of Synergy. They rubber stamp the electrons and they send them back to your neighbour and charge them full ticket. But what actually happens is that the electron goes up the wire and then to your neighbour. And so we should really have an electricity market that more resembles that, right? So I want the battery in my car to be cooking your dinner and your battery inside at your house to make my tea in the morning. And that's where we're going, and Australia knows it, but we're not incentivizing that to go as fast as it can because we're protecting this monopoly and this idea that the electrons go back to some retailer. Depending upon which bureaucrat you talk to in Western Australia, they say that they're sort of limping towards this, but they're not going fast enough. We've invented this idea of VPP, a virtual power plant. It's a completely unnecessary friction in the market. So the virtual power plant, the idea is we'll take everyone in this room and I'll aggregate all of the behaviour of all your batteries because I'm a tech bro and I can write software, and I'll get to make some profit from trading all of your electricity for you. But this amount of software it's like very basic. It should just be running on everyone's meter or in everyone's inverter and happen automatically. So we're still trying to invent. In Australia, as somebody said to me not so long ago, Australia loves to create a monopoly where one didn't need to exist. And we're in the process of doing that. And what we need to fight for is a really simple market with peer-to-peer trading I totally believe you should pay the poles and the wires fairly for getting my electrons to the neighbours. I don't mind paying them 2, 3, 4 cents, whatever it is. But if I want to sell my neighbour my electricity, my excess for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cents, that's going to be cheaper than what they're paying. Everyone should win. There's a lot of people that don't want the market to work this way because it's working for them right now.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask you a couple of questions about that, because both the federal government's Cheaper Home Batteries program, which was introduced on the same day as the government in WA introduced our residential battery scheme, are both contingent on participating in this VPP. And I know that there's been quite a lot of resistance from customers as a result of that. But do you think there is an alternative way of us thinking about it so that we can actually at least make something go forward, at least in the first instance, before we refine the system?
I think 85% of people in New South Wales get all the way through all of the sale of the battery, and the last thing is, will you sign up for this VPP? And it's kind of like the button and screen problem. Here's one more 10-page contract to read before you're allowed to turn your battery on. And they're like, no, a VPP. So like, people aren't, it's too much, we're not signing up for it. There's every reason to believe that the government could have just decided, we will build the thing that enables this to happen in the background, and that'll be part of the state-owned in Western Australia electricity system. You could imagine, and we imagine, and I know people in this audience are imagining things like, can we create a community-owned entity that is the VPP, doesn't charge all the fees, that makes it happen? It may turn out that we have to use VPs because it's about getting from where we are to where we're going, and there'll be a lot of competition and they'll eat each other's lunch, and it's just commodity software, so we might just be a few years in and it'll fix itself. But it is emblematic of, we should be doing a wholesale review of the electricity market, because we know where the future is going to end up. 300, more than double the amount of electricity, people trading peer-to-peer. The majority of the energy coming off our rooftops will be used by our neighbours. Like, we should be designing the market for that, but we're still coming up with band-aids like VPPs to not only protect... You know what a VPP is. A VPP is a virtual power plant. It's literally just a way of aggregating a set of people with software, whereas you could just do it without aggregating.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about fast and fair a little bit more, because you have acknowledged it all. This is great for a certain set of comfortably well-off owner occupiers, but what about the third of us who rent? Like, how are we able to kind of get amongst this? And what are the most effective things that we can do while not being able to do these big transitions in our homes?
Yeah, so I'm going to stop short of trying to do housing policy, which we probably also need some fixes in Australia. But one way, so we really only utilise the wires of our networks. We design them for the peak load. So everyone in summer turns their air conditioning on. That's when you get most electricity on the wires. For the rest of the year, they're barely being used. One way to make electricity cheaper, and this would help everyone, including the renters, is you utilise those wires more. So if you put twice as much electricity over the same wires, the price of the electricity, of that portion of electricity, will go down. Grossly, the estimate is you should be able to lower the price of electricity by 20 to 25% if, by enabling all of these batteries to coordinate and all of the solar to flood and do the neighbour-to-neighbour interactions, we would increase the utilisation enough to lower the price of electricity. So that would help the renters. That's a market fix that would make it fairer. The other harder questions for renters is, how do you split the split incentive? So the split incentive problem is the landlord has no incentive to put solar on your roof because it costs them money, and
they don't reap the benefits.
They don't reap the benefits. So I think you're going to... Someone recently, actually the guy who helps me run Rewiring Australia, he's like, Australians love a good ROI. Make it feel like a ROI for everyone. This is why we love this government battery program. It feels like, smells like, looks like, is a ROI. it's great, and Australians are loving it, and it's good. The battery's going out the door. It's not maybe maybe you could make it better policy, but it's popular. It's going out the door. It's good. It's a rort. So the rort that might solve the renter problem, and in fact, Victoria is now moving in this direction, is the landlord gets the capital expenditure, sort of the tax deduction on the hardware, and then you have accompanying regulation that compels the landlord to pass the lower cost of electricity in that house through to the renter. You could also do it with minimum energy efficiency standards or you report how much energy the household uses, and so people will stop renting the worst of our housing stock. And there are a bunch of ways where you can do this, including in Victoria. I think there's now policy where a landlord can't reasonably refuse a tenant's request for rooftop solar. Only if there's a technical or historic reason the building can't handle it can they say no. And if it is installed, the Victorian government will finance it at zero interest for the landlord. So the landlord wins, it's an easy transaction, and then the renter gets cheaper electricity. So there are ways and means. We need to do that. Ultimately, the way the renters will save the most money is on their electric vehicles, so we also need this to extend to the vehicle charging systems. We've got to have street side, I know the statistic for America, it's 40% of American cars sleep on the streets. It's probably about the same here, judging by everyone who keeps, they keep their gym. We reserve garages for gymnasiums and hobbies, as far as I can tell. So we need prolific curbside or gutter side charging networks, and we need it not to cost 60 cents a kilowatt hour from those public charging facilities. And that is actually how you're going to make it work for renters.
And on a much smaller note, in your conversation, your fantastic podcast conversation with Kim Lu.
She is my true climate hero. She's amazing.
So fantastic.
I think I only asked one question and she talked for an hour and 20.
Yeah, you just had to kind of guide her in the right direction a little bit, didn't you? But when it's a tiny thing from that, because she's uses cooking as one of her kind of ways of advocacy, that you can actually get portable induction stoves that you could bring into a rental situation as well. It could be
honestly, you can buy a totally functional single burner induction stove, which I remember being a bachelor, that was enough, or renter. I actually have an old friend here tonight who knew me in my bachelor period, and she probably would say, "You never cooked anything." So, but for $100, $200 you can have a functional single burner induction. For $400 you can literally have the ones that the industrial kitchens use. And they use them now, they call them cold kitchens because you don't get all the excess heat off the induction, so it's much healthier for kitchen staff in industrial restaurants to use induction. So I have one of these and it's amazing. I actually have two. One is a flat top one, and I bought one that is literally shaped like the wok. And it is an industrial, and it works faster than any gas wok you'll ever get. You really can impress certain ethnic friends. You're like, whoa, that's a wok. But yeah, for a renter, that single thing, that you can move that house to house. It still strikes me weird in Australia where you have to move the fridge.
Right.
It's not a thing in America. The fridge comes with the house. Here the fridge doesn't. No. But maybe we should make the stove not come with the house like the fridge. You've got to carry the fridge and the induction stove with you.
I've got a couple more questions before I start picking up questions from the Slido. Are there questions there? Yeah. Okay. I won't be long. I was listening to the conversation that you did with the Curveball podcast, and was at the beginning of the podcast, before it even began, there was. You
like to pretend that you read everything, but you just watched the podcast.
I absorb information really well through my ears. Was that there was a Woodside ad. And it just illustrates the great point that there's this ferocious campaign going on, of course, for hearts and minds by the gas industry at the moment. And does electrification need to take the same pathway?
Yeah, but unfortunately we don't have a single giant profitable entity to really fight back with all the ads. And unfortunately it's still a competitive market, so the Teslas are fighting with the Hyundais. and they're not collectively, we don't have a trade group for all of the solutions that is working the way the trade groups from fossil do as a unit to sell you the drugs. And we totally need that. I still find, I don't know, this is weird, I find it just absolutely, it should be illegal to me that you can have Ford Ranger ads that break in every football code in Australia. Like, we know these are the things that are killing us and our children's future. And then, the gas stove ads are still on during we're still, the great populace is still getting, that's the messaging. And we're not really, I think this needs to start at the top. Like, we still haven't had any leader. So I went to the celebration of the Inflation Reduction at the White House. I got my 1.25 second fist bump with Joe. And he gave a 1.5 hour stump speech and really didn't mention climate change, didn't say didn't sell this as a vision for the future. It almost felt like a union rally. So that's to say, even there it wasn't like, but my wish is for, hopefully we get COP and hopefully Albo stands up and says, I have a vision for our country, we're going to lead the world, we're going to do this thing. Hey, I said it's a dream. It should be possible, right? Australia would save $1 trillion by 2050 for us, our households, if we signed up for this Replace the Five Things program. Every Australian household will save $4,200 a year if we just do this thing. This should be easy for Labor, and we should be able to do it on the international stage. And then I think you start to shift the culture, and then the trade industries should work together more so that we are buying blanket coverage for it, and all of the electric vehicle and all of the induction stove and all of the heat pump and all of the solar companies benefit from collectively saying, living better with electrons.
And I mean, in light of all of that, then I'm quite interested in your thoughts on, we're waiting for that 2035 emissions reduction target announcement, and the ballpark is sort of 65 to 75%, with the government apparently angling up, well, I don't know from what actually, but
they're going to make two lies buried in it.
Where that is measured from, for starters.
So I don't know if anyone remembers the last targets. 82%. Does anyone know what 82% of what was?
Was it from 2005?
No, it's 82% of electricity generation will be renewable, but they implied that it was 82% emissions reductions. But it's really just of electricity, and it was only the amount of electricity we were using in 2005. It wasn't accommodating the 250% of electricity we need to electrify the cars and other things, right? And then 26% of the 42%, this is the other number they had, which is emissions reductions from 2005 baseline. 26% of that was the coalition's bullshit trees on Queensland farmer properties that we now know aren't really going to do the abatement. But they're still counting that in those negative emissions in our emissions reductions. So it's a little bit of a little white lie about how well we're doing on electrification, because it needs to be 3 times as whatever target they have. And they'll do the same thing this time. Unfortunately, this is all also baked into how most of the whole world is doing these. And it's legacy of how politicians think about energy systems and sectors and stuff. So, I don't know. I expect it'll sound better than last time, but I'll still be angry and disappointed.
Well, I was curious really about the fact that I'd heard that the government was wanting to obviously aim towards the low end of that range for reasons of it actually being achievable. But in light of what we've been talking about tonight, surely more than that is achievable. The upper end of that must be achievable, if not more.
The correct analogy is if you were serious as a country and you were treating this like okay, so why does every environmental group want us to declare a state of emergency? And Trump is the clue. Trump is declaring everything a state of emergency right now because governments have special powers when something is a state of emergency. They can do things that are outside the normal rules of government and capitalism. The emergency that most of them are referencing was the emergency powers granted to Roosevelt during World War II to develop something called the arsenal of democracy. Because basically, Churchill called Roosevelt and says, the Germans are coming for our navy. Once they've got their coming for you, we're fucked. Help. That was 1940. Took 2 years for Roosevelt to convince Congress to get back in the war. And what he knew was that Europe couldn't out-manufacture Germany, and so it was up to America to build things. So the emergency war powers were used to take control of the entire industrial economy of America. America had less than 1,000 airplanes total in 1939, and the largest was a 12-seater, something like that. By 1944, they were building 10,000 airplanes a month. They guaranteed 7% profit to any company that could make any of a short list of things, which were called, the war material. It was airplanes, boats, tanks, guns, and radios. That's my list. And so they fully industrialized the economy, took control of the economy, built all of these things, treated like an emergency, and they, the legend has it, we beat the Axis and the Allies won on the back of American manufacturing. If we did that, we could lick climate change before 2040, probably 2035. China is actually kind of on this program. The tantrum in the White House right now is actually a little bit bipartisan and weirdly anti-China. Sorry, this is maybe not a question you asked, but I just got to get off my chest. Sorry if you didn't come to listen to this, but I got to get it off my chest. So 2013, China created something called the Made in China 2025 policy. It was 2014. It was based on the 2013 Industry 4.0 policy in Germany, which was an industrial policy, actual industrial policy. And China set their goal to make, I won't get the numbers exactly right, but it's close, 80% of the world's industrial automation equipment, 70 or 80% of the world's industrial robots, and 80% of the world's new energy technologies by 2025. New energy technologies is the basket of goods that includes power electronics, solar equipment, batteries, electric vehicles, wind turbines. China has hit it out of the park. If you take the production statistics of China and you assume that they keep raising their production at the rate they've been raising it for the last decade, the whole world could be renewably powered by 2038. So China did what I actually implored Biden to do in the book Electrify that I wrote. It's like, treat it like an emergency, do this industrial build-up. China's on track to do it. I don't know why, and I asked my Democrat friends and my Republican friends, the remaining one, why is there bipartisan consensus? Like, the solution here was let China build it. You don't make any money building solar cells and wind turbines. You make money financing these projects. You make way more as a project. I learned this lesson the hard way. I'm an engineer. I wanted to make stuff, but you should go into finance. So America should have financed this, denominated in US dollars. China could make it. There was, hey, welcome to the Superpower Club. We're solving climate change together. That I tried to pitch that to the Democrats in 2022. They wanted to turn this into industry policy war, and then the Trump administration has doubled down. But if Australia was serious, funny event in my community. So not many people in the audience are as tragic and on American politics as me, but third day of this administration, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, met with the Russians at MBS's palace in Saudi Arabia. So these are the three largest fossil fuels countries in the world, producers. It's a miracle Australia wasn't there because we're fourth. Thank God we weren't. MBS is the guy who kills American journalists for fun. And their statements before the press is, America would have made trillions of dollars over the last decade if we had have partnered with Russia in natural gas and fossil fuels instead of putting sanctions on Russia. this is the most extraordinary single day change in global geopolitics I've ever seen. And in my community, we're a dirty hippie bunch of people who think about these things, and someone's like, their question to me is like, so do you think Australia is going to break with the Russo-America faction, or are we going to break with China-Europe? And like, that's a pretty significant question, but that is kind of the question on the table here. You know, the Woodside, the gas expansion project is let's side with Russo-America faction and pretend that fossil fuels are still a good idea. But we should be providing the industrial inputs to China to make the stuff for the whole world. That's the Australia gets sensible. Like we are 55% of the world's lithium supply. We're a hugely significant portion of iron, copper, nickel, every single one of the things required to do this. We can do that with China. We should also be offering to do that with everyone who isn't China or America. So Korea needs us, Taiwan needs us, Japan needs us, and we can do it. I even forgot your question, but thank you, I got it off my chest.
The question was whether we could achieve better than even what those emissions reduction targets were.
We could, I have a friend who hates it, but we could shit it in.
Yeah.
I say this on Instagram all the time just to piss him off. We could shit it in.
Yeah. So bringing it back from that big kind of global perspective back to Western Australia,
you can especially shit it in.
And today you met with our Minister for Energy.
Assistant.
Assistant Minister. So
no, assistant to the Minister. I think, is that right? Yeah.
So what are you able to say about how that went? And that's it for tonight, everybody.
I don't know, I think there's... good news is extremely well informed about what we need to do technically to make the electricity grid work, not perhaps open-minded as to the timeline and the methods to get there fastest.
So but you didn't come away feeling optimistic that there was ambition and vision?
Oh, come on, my bar has been set so low. I'm under FBI investigation. This meeting was great. There's a great question in Slido that I'm really glad has been asked, because I actually wanted to go back to this about 2515. How can local councils engage in driving change, and how can residents demand more of the local councils, and what specifically should they be calling for? It's a great question. Like, they're the most trusted form of government in Australia still. Hopefully that increases. Maybe some murmurings. I cut down a tree branch and am now in trouble with my council. So the councils are hugely important. In Western Australia, more important because councils own the land where the batteries and the poles and the solar needs to go. There was some report mentioned today about how much of the building, you're only using 13% of your rooftop potential here in Western Australia. The huge potential that's not used anyway is all of our empty parking spaces. Councils own a lot of roof space, councils own a lot of parking spaces. Councils know where the cars are going to be parked during the day, which is the most important thing to make the future grid work. They're probably, they're going to approve or own or in some way be involved with where all the public vehicle charging goes. There is the potential that councils have a role in the financing problem. There are schemes in the US. It was actually Governor Jerry Brown of California. His favorite policy achievement was called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. This was rate-based financing for climate solutions. So you can't afford the upfront cost for the heat pump water heater. Council buys it for you, and you pay it back on the rates as you save money. So cash flow improves for the household, right? This is a good idea. So local council could in fact be part of the financing solution. They've definitely got to be involved with some of the public generation if we do community batteries, one of the ways that might be the right way to do it, government's going to approve where that land is, local government. So they have a big role to play.
Yeah. Thank you. So there was a follow-on question from that. Oh, now that everything's been voted into different order, but there was one about the best location for grid-scale batteries. Can you see that one,
It's at the top
Fraser?
there.
Oh, it's right at the top, is it?
Yeah.
Yes. Where is the best location for grid-scale batteries, considering they're being installed near WA coal plants instead of urban areas with excess solar?
I had a great chance meeting with the guy who runs the WEM today.
A chance meeting?
Chance meeting with the guy who dials the knobs on the Western Australian electricity infrastructure, the WEM. Paul.
Paul from WEM.
Paul from WEM.
What did he say?
Paul Elliott. Thank you, whoever knows Paul Elliott. Anyway, Paul and I instantly got into the nerdy where should the batteries go question. So this question is really important. Where should the batteries be? They do different things in different places. A battery behind the meter might only help you. A battery way up near a coal plant or the wind farm helps the wind farm or the main electricity grid, but it doesn't, there's a whole bunch of bottlenecks in between where if you have batteries near those bottlenecks, we increase the utilization and we lower the cost of the network. So there's a bottleneck on the side of your house and a battery can help solve that. There's even a bottleneck on the wire that goes to your kitchen. Some people don't have a big enough wire to put a nice induction stove, so I'm actually involved with some people in America. We're putting batteries in the induction stove. So instead of a $2,000 or $5,000 visit from the Sparky, you put $200 worth of batteries in the induction stove, and then it can cook any 3-hour meal you need, trickle charges during the day and takes off that peak load. So then there's a bottleneck on that ugly wart at the top of every 10th pole. That's called a distribution transformer. It's either a big square or a cylinder. That serves about somewhere between 10 and 50 homes. Sometimes that's the constraint. Some batteries there would enable you to put 2 more equal charges on homes, for example, and then you might put the battery at the substation. Anyway, Paul and I agreed that the batteries that would do the most benefit would be batteries at community level. And I only say that word carefully because community battery means something different to everyone. But if there were batteries within your community, by which I mean on that string which connects you and all of your neighbours, the wires that, the crazy thing about electricity is literally every Australian is connected to each other, except for you guys because you're special, but you're connected to your special cells.
Only to us, yeah.
But batteries on that local distribution grid would enable you to build system strength from underneath. It would increase the robustness and the reliability of the whole grid. It would remove a whole bunch of the bottlenecks, and it would allow us to double or triple the utilization of those local wires. So that we want batteries everywhere, and there will need to be some in all the places, but we've created incentives for huge batteries to go out here, whereas where we would really want more from a technical perspective is in that local area.
Thank you. Chris is asking, Australia's problem is Scope 3 emissions from our energy exports. How do we deal with this, or do you think those markets will die from lack of global demand?
Yeah, I mean, all of our, we are 1% of global emissions, or just a bit less if it's just what we do to be Australian. And we're over 3% of global emissions if you include our LNG and our metallurgical coal and other and our meat exports. The bind, if you're generous, and I should be more generous to Australia's politicians, if you're generous, the bind we are in is that we are dependent upon these exports for a huge amount of our economy, and the thing that sinks governments is losing jobs. So we approve gas projects because we don't yet know how we're going to replace the $50 billion a year in income from LNG with something else. Our big exports are LNG, metallurgical coal, but our bigger export is iron ore. If we only convert 1% of our iron ore into iron within Australia, so we ship the red dirt, it gets processed somewhere else, we could put 5 times as much energy as Australia uses into converting all of that iron ore into iron domestically. We would increase its value from about 100 billion to $1 trillion. And we would not only zero out our, be able to stop selling gas and stop selling coal. We would zero out our scope 3, but we would also help South Korea and Taiwan and Indonesia and everyone else who needs that iron zero out their emissions. So that's how it's going to happen. And I think the reality is you can now squint and you can see the moment where the economics are inevitable that is what will happen. That's a little bit to the first question of the night. What about the 2070 gas? I think we're going to bankrupt them before then.
A question from Anonymous who says, WA startup Power Ledger.
Who are you?
Yes, he's Anonymous. Created a platform to support peer-to-peer power trading. Do you think this model could work, and what should be done to enable it? Are you familiar with this model?
What's the first part of the question?
Power Ledger. WA startup called Power Ledger.
It's about peer-to-peer trading.
Yeah. I know. Sorry, I just didn't catch the
Bitcoin.
So,
Blockchain.
there's a lot of power ledgers already exist. Right now, my understanding is Synergy is your network. They didn't really love Power Ledger because Power Ledger were clipping the ticket and it was a bit of a tax in the system. Software eventually is free, right? All of these Power Ledger, VPPs, all of these things, they're just software stacks. They're all, at some point, they're just going to be commodity things like the free Unix that runs the whole internet. So, a better version of Project Jupiter or various other things that Western Australia is involved in is just pay one good nerd to write the open source Power Ledger and then give it away for free. Like, you could do this. This is not a hard project. I think roughly, I get to hire some pretty smart people, but this is roughly an intern project in my office. Like, we really pretend that this needs to be way heavier duty and way harder than it is. And there's a lot of people with a financial interest in having us believe that. So I think the answer is Power Ledger is roughly the idea. I don't criticize the guys for having, they were trying to work with what you can and start a business and do the right thing in the market. I think, we could have, if imagine that we had to solve this problem in 1981 when local councils and state governments owned all of the energy infrastructure. They would have just, a bureaucrat like my grandfather who ran the Department of Main Roads in Australia, he would have been like, all right, software guy down in the bureaucracy, write the thing that solves this. But we believe that markets solve everything right now. But this will. Long answer is it'll happen eventually. It's the right idea, maybe not quite done at the right moment in the right way.
Question from Brad Pettit. Where are you, Brad? Hi, Brad. Saul, I love how you frame the issues in such an optimistic and solutions-focused way. Is this what
you don't really give me a choice? I want to be all depressing and say we're heading for 3 or 4 degrees. Get out there and chain yourself to a fence. But they don't want me to say that.
So the question is this what the broader environment movement should be doing too?
I have a wonderful new friend, only met him in the last couple of years in the US, and his name is Michael Bloomberg. No, not that Michael Bloomberg. And he runs an organization called Groundwork Data. He literally wrote the first studies of how the gas death spiral is going to happen as people defect off the gas networks. And he now runs a thing called the Future of Heat Initiative in the US. So he works on gas. We have a weekly rant storm about What was the question?
It was about whether that optimistic and solutions-focused way is good for the environment.
So our randstorm every week, the first 15 minutes of it every week is fuck the environmental movement. We do not need another Masters in Sustainability. I mean, sorry if this offends anyone. But if we have one more person with a Masters in Sustainability showing up to actually a technical and regulatory knife fight to say, hey, we should solve climate change, like we're way past we should solve climate change aspiration stuff. We just do not have enough technically rigorous people in the fight doing the hard work. And the climate movement to me feels really unrigorous right now, and we're not getting in there and doing the work.
So what do you think activists should, what angle do you think they could take that would be useful, that would be good messaging?
I think we need to be on the front foot against fossil fuels. We now, the activists should be finding their economist aunts and uncles, the ones that, and saying, you now are a mainstream economist. Why are you not telling the story about how electrification is anti-inflationary? Because we take all of the volatility out of fossil fuels and we convert it into 20-year finance. Why aren't you telling why did you let the Productivity Commission in Australia get away with this ridiculous report where we know that the Australian economy can run on 40% of the energy it does today without any impact to our thing? The greatest productivity increase you can do in Australia today, and we can do it instantly, is electrification of all things. Like, we are not fighting the fight in the serious forums. We're talking to each other on Instagram, complaining about, can someone solve climate change for me, please? I know that sounds a bit harsh, but I am angry because the fucking Democrats in America, we lost this fight in America because we weren't rigorous enough.
Okay. However, you did say that we needed to only chain ourselves to fences for another 5 years. So what should we say while we're chained to the fence?
Well, I want the kids to chain themselves to the fence, and then I want us to be, I'm going to these community groups, and we now are having these people, you all, and I went with some of you today to have these meetings with the minister. You now know as much and better than me in the local context what the things that need to have happen are, and you've all got to go and be squeaky wheels and do that. And that's like, what's the new energy minister's name?
Amber Jane Sanderson?
Yeah, every single one of you should request an appointment. I think they have to eventually grant them to you individually and go in and ask for the same thing until you make it happen. And we need to be doing that type of work and crib from each other, learn what the things we got to demand are, and we need to be doing that. So we need that type of work, and then we need the work. We're still allowing the Australian newspaper to write absolutely ridiculous things about we need gas. Where's your no one is saying where's your modelling. They just refer to some consulting group that doesn't show any open work. So we're hurdling ourselves into this future without having modelled it. I work with the people who've modelled the right future. I can't be loud enough and angry enough often enough. So we need a lot more people calling out every single one of these bullshits, because we have to change the narrative, and we have to be rigorous, because government is scared of a government will be toppled if there's a blackout, and a government will be toppled if jobs are lost. So we have to be rigorous about reassuring them that that's not going to happen, and they have gas lobbyists in their ear every minute, every day saying there's about to be a blackout unless you buy it. We need gas, right? And so we're not fighting those fights. Yeah. We're saying,
save the chicken.
Something, yeah.
We are out of time, and I think you're right about that, in the sense that someone recently said to me, well, the problem here is that we don't have a burning platform. We don't appear to have a burning platform. To which the response was, the inertia is actually the burning platform. The fact that we're not doing enough, we're not arcing up enough, we're not asking enough, we're not, that's actually the burning platform. So
it's hard. I mean, I would approximately 3 years ago have liked to have taken 2,000 Australians to the steps of Parliament House and say, we demand X, Y, and Z of market regulation, representation of the Australian public on our energy agency boards, right? We are the infrastructure, yet we don't have a voting seat on AER or AEMO, right? I only now, 4 years later, have I almost got the list of things that we should be going to demand. So it is hard work to get to figure out what is our real request. We are angry, we want faster climate action, we know that the energy system isn't quite working for us, we know it can go faster, but we have to reduce that to really, and this is a group communal project, it shouldn't be my project, I'm not good enough at it, and there's a lot of local differences, and it is different in Western Australia than everywhere else in the world. But we have to get to those concise requests, and then we have to go and nag the politicians until they yield to our mess.
I know Fraser's about to come up and say a couple of things, are you?
Just was it off, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming over and spending time with us again. It's always so valuable to hear your thoughts, and I know you will be outside signing books after this, so if you let Saul go out after this, and then he can take up position and you guys can all go and have a chat with him and get your book signed. Please thank Saul Griffith.
All right, just say a few words in closing. Thank you, Saul and Meri, for an interesting evening. In terms of call to action, so I think Saul touched a few of those points there. Saul will be in the foyer to sign some books until around 8 o'clock. So community groups and individuals and organisations are providing trusted, independent sources of information and support for those households seeking to electrify, and that's a point that Saul made, is that this is a community effort and we need to join together. Definitely get organised, support, join or start a group. Neighbours, street level, suburbs, town, regions. So please talk to Electrify WA or check on the website and join a group. There'll be more information in the foyer if you're interested. There's some leaflets out there. Talk to your local council. Saul mentioned local council to find out what their climate action plans are. It's a good idea to work with your council rather than against them, if that's possible. Definitely sign up to Rewiring Australia for updates on electrifying everything across Australia. They do offer high quality free resources, a communications platform and a support network. Learn from others and basically reuse Rewiring Australia's resources. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. And as Saul says, you really need to contact your state and federal MPs. And I know us have been involved in that. It's a very difficult process because it feels like you're not being listened to. But if there's enough of people pounding on the door saying the same thing, then they will start to listen. Because it helps raise awareness and build that all-important political capital for change. That's what we're trying to achieve. And in terms of some interesting stuff, I don't know if you've read Meri Wilkinson's excellent quarterly essay. It's really, really worth a read. I've been in the oil and gas industry for 45 years, and I learned a lot reading her book that I didn't realise about what was happening in WA. So it is very much worth a read. And in supporting local journalism, I don't know if you know Peter Milne. Peter Milne was meant to be here tonight, but unfortunately he's sick. He's had some excellent reporting on energy and mining. He's an ex-engineer, oil and gas engineer. He's now a journalist. His reporting is very, very insightful. You'll read stuff there you will definitely not read in the West. So readers, go to his website, subscribe to his newsletter, and follow him on LinkedIn. He's very well informed and very amusing. What's that? Boiling Cold, Peter Milne. So thanks everyone for turning up tonight, and good luck on your electrification journey, and good night.